Save 58 lives next week. I have no idea what this is about, to be honest. Somebody in the chat just posted this video. Let's see.
Let's save your life today. Not long term, today. By specifically finding out what's most likely to kill you next week so you can actually avoid it.
Oh, damn.
First, let's assume that 3 million people will watch this video and that you're all among our typical viewers. You're between the ages of 15 and 35 and you're living in Western countries.
Yeah.
We based this video on statistics specifically for your demographic and our own estimates. They're not perfect, but roughly correct. Don't worry, we might also save your life if you're older or live somewhere
so this
else.
seems to be a
Okay,
prediction of possible ways in which I can die in the next week. All right, I actually am very curious about it. I mean, honestly, I don't go out too much outside of work. I mean, trains maybe. I would say cars. Car crash for sure. I mean, I don't use the car, so maybe like crossing, yeah, might be. Like crossing the streets and then getting hit by a car. I would say that is number one. I would say so. Maybe robberies in certain areas, but I'm not sure. Maybe falling down the stairs? Maybe.
Let's gather all 3 million
Let's
of you
see.
in 40 packed football stadiums. Look around. Most of you are teens and young adults. So much potential. Unfortunately, by the end of next week, 58 of you watching right now will not be alive anymore. 3,000 of you will sadly have passed in a year.
What?
That's 1 in 1,000. Or not. Today, we will save your, yes, your life by looking at the avoidable ways you might die.
All right.
We'll not cover long-term things like diseases because we want to prevent your death next week. Your life consists of millions of
no
micro
idea where
decisions,
they go.
and some of you are on a path that will end soon. Can we guide you down a different path? Humans are incredibly bad at judging the real risks of life.
True.
Bad things happen to people all the time because there are so many of us. And since the news focuses so much on freak accidents, we have a completely distorted picture of what actually poses a danger to us. For example, the chance any of you are going to die in a terror attack is below 0.0002%. There are super risky activities that are clearly insanely dangerous, like wing.
I mean, let's be honest, most of those things are about perceptions, right? You perceive that to, like, of course, this is the media a lot pumping those things, but imagine this, a terrorist act is something completely out of the ordinary. So, of course, it will be posted in social media, it will be reflected by mainstream media. Like, it's something so outrageous that it never happened that for sure you're gonna see it there. So, I mean, distorted perceptions, yes, but it's due to the fact that those acts are so out of the ordinary, and at times they are made public on purpose. Like imagine somebody just crossing the bridge and shooting. I remember for the UK terrorist attack. So in the, I think it was London Bridge or something like this. They were crossing, stopped the car, went out and started to shoot. Something so out of the ordinary that, of course, like you have maybe a distorted perception of it, but it happens more frequently lately than it ever did. Like nobody ever decapitated anyone in France before the Nice attack, you know. Anyway,
Suit flying.
I'm going out
If
on
all
the
3 million
tangent
of
here.
you were to practice this sport,
Let's see what
about
can happen to
285 of
me.
you would die just next week. Then there are things that are pretty dangerous. If all of you rode a motorcycle, 35 of you would not survive next week. If you don't want
fair
this
enough.
kind of risk in your life, well, don't do these things. It turns out what's most likely to kill you next week are things that feel safe, that you do all the time and are routine, things you may even be really good at. This is what we'll prevent. By far the most dangerous thing you're currently doing is driving. 8 of you will die in a car crash just next week. 416 of you over the next year. Mostly because most of you are not aware what driving really is. You're zooming through the world in a metal torpedo at the speed of a cheetah or faster, In an average car that weighs 1.5 tons at roughly 60 kilometers an hour or 40 miles an hour, you have the mechanical energy of a piano dropped from the top of the Statue of Liberty. If you crash, this energy is released into your car and, more importantly, your body. 30% of deadly car accidents are caused by speeding, mostly because you overestimate yourself. But that will kill 2 of you next week. It's very straightforward. If you go fast, you have less time to react and only notice the danger when it's too late. A lot of you watching tend to go with the speed limit regularly, which saves very little time. If your destination is 20 minutes away at 100 kilometers an hour or 60 miles an hour, driving 15 kilometers an hour or 10 miles an hour faster will save less than 3 minutes. But your probability of a deadly crash increases by 60%. So 2 of you may survive next week if you just tone down your speeding. This alone would eliminate the most dangerous activity in your life. Isn't this wild? Close.
Well, if you think about it, this is all super fair, but 3 minutes at times, it's quite... I mean, to be honest, when I see people speeding in cars, I always ask me the same thing. What would you do with those 3 minutes if you are just a regular guy who stays at home, watches television, and is just going out on a grocery shopping? There is not much you can do with those 3 minutes, and 99% of the people who are speeding, they are really just trying to be faster for just the sake of being faster, but nothing to actual gain out of it.
Second is drinking alcohol and driving, causing 25% of deadly crashes.
I don't have a car,
in the next
so
week,
I'm
this
safe
will
at
also
least here.
kill 2 of you. You don't even need to feel drunk, you just have to have consumed enough to slow your reaction time. Even if you still feel completely in control, chances are high that you're not. Aside from being extremely illegal, it's one of the most reckless and dangerous things too many people do regularly. And it's easy to avoid. Just don't do it, ever. Taking a cab after that work event next week, even if you only had 2 drinks, might save your life.
Yeah.
Just because you were distracted while driving, 1 of you will die next week. Maybe because you were eating or fumbling with the radio, but let's be real, probably because you were looking at your phone.
Ich bin ein kleiner Geschäftsmann.
I mean, I'm thinking now, I was driving in the US, like recently I did a trip in the US. So I remember that at the beginning, like I haven't driven in like a while. So I was kind of like carefully watching everything I was doing. But the more you do it, the less you start to think. And I remember one time I was watching something close to me, like a tree or something, and I think we were going on a panoramic road, and I was watching, and I remember that the car had to tell me to stop because in front of me the person just hit the brake, and I didn't notice it, right? So the car made me notice that I was about to crash in front of me. And to be honest, I would have never done that in the first 2 to 3 days that I had the car. It's just the more you drive, the less you pay attention. It's just the way it is. You
Drive
see
at
it as
60
a
kilometers an
normal
hour
thing
or
to
40
do.
miles an hour and check your phone for just a moment, you've now crossed an entire football field, completely blind. Stop doing this and you might survive next week. Lastly, we want to have an especially frank word with the 3 of you that will die because you didn't wear a seatbelt. What an incredibly stupid way to die young. Way more of you will get into a car crash and be injured for all the same reasons. And of course, often the victims of crashes are not to blame at all, and many of you watching right now will end up hurting someone else. But you now know how to reduce the chances of this happening massively. Let's move on to other deadly things that you can easily avoid. 26 of you will die by falling, or more precisely by hitting the ground in the next year, which means 1 of you will die every 2 weeks. You'd think the danger of height was not as big of a deal, but it is. Going up ladders, working on scaffolding or on a roof, and going hiking in nature is normal. But falling from a height of just 2 meters has about the same mechanical energy as a bowling ball dropped from a 7-story building. You probably wouldn't want to be hit by it, and it only gets worse the higher you go. For a fall from 5 meters, the height of a large ladder, the equivalent would be the energy of a bowling ball dropped from a 19-story building. But even just falling over can easily be fatal because your head is all the way at the top of your body. Another surprisingly dangerous thing is water. One of you will drown next week. Being in and around water is fun and doesn't seem to be a big deal, mainly for 3 reasons. You'll underestimate how dangerous a body of water is and be taken by strong currents or riptides. You'll overestimate your swimming abilities. You're most likely a much worse swimmer than you think. Or, also sadly common, you'll go into the water drunk, especially dangerous because you're more reckless and even more likely to be overwhelmed by a cold shock or hypothermia.
This is something that
harmless situations around water turn deadly so quickly that in the US, drowning is the second most common cause of death by accident for kids, after, you may have guessed it, car crashes. So if you're going for a swim next week, keep this in mind. Make sure that the water is safe, assume you are at best a mediocre swimmer, and you won't die. Also, for the love of God, be careful on cruise ships. If you go overboard, you have a 60% chance of dying. Let's move on to the thing that will kill the most people watching this video. This one is extremely sad and very delicate because sensationalist public discussion can make it worse. It's harming yourself. Statistically, about 10 of you could die this way next week. There's something that you might not be aware of that might save your life. The majority of these deaths happen in crisis situations, usually triggered by traumatic events and extraordinary circumstances that overwhelm people and undermine their coping strategies. Studies show that suicide rarely occurs out of the blue. There are warning signs, and often suicidal thoughts and feelings can be mastered by getting professional help, for example from a crisis intervention center. Most people...
Honestly, life sucks. Life really fucking sucks. And somebody has to say this. Like, life is really... Like, life sucks. You know? It does. And when you are young, you're shielded by your parents from this reality. And we don't believe them because we are teenagers and we don't realize it, right? We're not adults, we're teenagers. We have food on the table. We have a roof over our head. We can sleep safely thinking only about school and stuff like that. But as soon as that veil gets off, like I give you a very stupid example. Just to eat and to have a roof, you have to work. And having to work means that if the parents always told you that you were special and you start to work at McDonald's, just the pressure out of it just becomes increasingly worse by the age, you know? Like you can work at McDonald's at 17, 18, 19, and maybe 20s. If you're working there at 35, I bet a lot of people, and I'm not saying that working, the problem is like society, right? That thinks that only good jobs is like CEO of a company, right? So again, those are even deeper layers of this already big problem of life sucks. And you see this small thing of having a roof over your head and food leads you to work, and work leads you to more other problems, and it's a cascade of issues, right? Society that tells you that at 35 you're a failure if you work at McDonald's and all those things, and you are constantly thinking you're a failure. Then social media, where your ex co-workers or ex people that you met at school are maybe successful or maybe pretending to be successful. It's just everything that ruins your possibility to be happy. And it just continuously does that. And no wonder people kill themselves, you know? And I have to say, yes, sometimes a talk will solve it, but it's also the person who you're talking to very important. I had sometimes, like everybody experiences bad moments in their lives, and I had times where I had to speak about those things, and the person I was talking to, every time I was saying something, was trying to refer to himself or herself right away, like, yeah, but for me or what I did. Like, they are not listening, they are just pretending to listen and to put their ego again back into it. And it's frustrating because you want sometimes just somebody who's it doesn't even provide you a solution. It's just listening. But it's so hard. It's to find just somebody who listens.
People who survive an attempt don't try again and end up being very glad that they did survive. It was just way too much for them, and they felt desperate and as if there was no way out.
Yeah.
It would be so nice if someone watching this who's in a bad spot decides to get help. You matter. You really do. And the world is better with you.
Actually, I'm thinking that a dog and a cat or any pet is actually better for you than talking to another person. You have no idea. Again, as I said, sometimes just talking to a person is just so annoying. So annoying. So it just makes it worse because they are self-centered. A lot of Gen Z millennials are just self-centered pricks. So just actually go out and go to a dog shelter or something. A dog doesn't talk. If you want to talk to him, he just listens. But most importantly, he just perceives life in a more simpler way. And just by looking at it or staying with him or her allows you to be happy. It's like a contagious feeling that dogs have, especially certain breeds of dogs like Labradors, Golden Retrievers. And there is a reason why those breeds of dog are used as in pet therapy, which I think actually works. Like I have saw those things working in real life.
In it. Please stay with us. If you currently feel overwhelmed by life, seeking help is not weakness, it's strength. We've put some resources for you in the video description. This also means another thing. If you have someone in your life going through a crisis, withdrawing, expressing hopelessness, or talking about this topic, even jokingly, take it seriously. Show them that they're loved and important. You personally could save a life, maybe next week already. You might never know, but worst case, you've been a true friend. Now for the final thing, and to be honest, this will not save your life next week, but maybe this year. Cancer is sadly a real risk even for your age group and will kill 5 of you next week. The most common being thyroid, breast and testicular cancer.
What?
The author of this video had cancer at the age of 32. If he'd been aware of this risk and went to regular checkups, this could have been entirely avoided. So this is also a personal heartfelt recommendation. We collected a few resources about screenings and self-checkups in our sources for you. Check them out. At least one type of cancer is almost entirely avoidable.
Entdecke die Kaffeevollautomaten von Chibo. Jetzt ab 249 €. Traumhaft.
Melanoma or skin cancer. You might be surprised how deadly this is, but as a great philosopher said, the sun is a deadly laser. It's burning your skin with the energy released from trillions of tons of plasma. The solution couldn't be simpler. Use sunscreen. It's been a while or you've been in the water. Cool, apply it again. About 9 of you will die of melanoma in the next year, so sunscreen might save your life.
Actually,
okay, let's
something
wrap up.
I will.
Just by being more aware and modifying your behavior a little bit, you personally
Just
could...
as a point of contact, I went this summer to the beach and I never apply sunscreen and I turned out red as a lobster. With that one, I can totally die.
Survive next week. Dozens of all of you watching right now.
I don't know why.
Hundreds of you this year. Hopefully, you'll be able to tell us stories in the next few years of situations that almost turned really bad, but didn't because you behaved differently. And if you have people in your life that do or don't do the things we talked about today, please send them this video. It might save their lives too. Life is just the best thing, and we hope to celebrate it together for as long as possible. If you needed a nudge to seize the day, this is it. Start doing the things you want to do today. Run that marathon, write that novel, or become the smartest version of yourself. And while long-distance running and literature may take some time, you can start sharpening your mind right now in minutes a day with our friends at Brilliant. Brilliant will make you a better thinker and problem solver with thousands of interactive bite-sized lessons on just about anything you may be curious about, from data analysis and maths to technology, physics and beyond. All it takes.
I mean, out of those, what I could die of for sure is skin cancer. even though and probably checkups. I need to do checkups for sure. I never go to the doctor. Like I live in a place where there is like free healthcare, but nonetheless, there are some limitations, and also like I live in a very big city, so it's pain in the ass to go to the doctor. But I think actually I always thought to myself that that was stupid not to do actually a checkup because it can save your life. So I mean, imagine finding cancer at 33 though. That must be really shit.